Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. I am thrilled and delighted to have you join us here again today. I'm Angela, and if you love the podcast, make sure you like and subscribe and let me know in the comments what you think of these interviews. I appreciate that. So, I have a very special guest. Lara Silverman is a best-selling Christian author, a lawyer, a jazz singer, and comedic actress. And she holds a JD from Stanford Law School and a BA in both economics and political science from UC Berkeley, where she was one of 6 finalists for the University Medal, Berkeley's highest academic distinction. Before falling seriously ill in 2018, she worked for 2 federal judges and practiced high stakes litigation for 3 years at Arnold and Porter Kay Scholar LLP, where she specialized in intellectual property, antitrust, and contract cases of all kinds. And then in 2023, she founded the Silverman Show. It was a multifaceted comedy, music, and theology show, and released her debut jazz pop album as her own music producer in February 2024. And in September 2024, just last year, she debuted as Mrs. Serious in her solo American comedy show online, amassing upwards of 300,000 views on individual videos on social media. Her writing has been featured in various respected Christian blogs where she reflects on her faith, suffering, and grace, and has encouraged readers across diverse audiences. Even as she remains mostly bedridden today, she anchors her unwavering hope in God. And she just published Singing Through Fire in August 2025, so just recently, which is now an Amazon #1 bestseller. So congratulations on that and so much more. And thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an, honor to be on.
Yeah. So, you know, I was telling you a little bit before we started here that this podcast is all about, the life challenges that sometimes we have to go through and how we are able to rise from that. And you've had a lot of suffering, um especially the chronic illness and a loss of your husband. And you had a promising legal career and had to move from that, and that would have been a big change in itself. So how did you get through all of this?
Sure. Thanks so much, Angela. I mean, it's been a wild 8 years. I'll
Yeah.
start by saying that I mean, just to answer your question directly, and I don't want to be pushy. I mentioned to you before we started, for me, the way I've handled grief the last 8 years is my Christian faith. I believe in God, and I respect, your audience's views individually. But for me, my founding has really been finding joy in Jesus Christ, even when my life is burning down around you, which as a Christian, you will find sometimes can be harder because, if you're atheist or, I mean, I don't want to speak for others, but it's like sometimes I feel in my mind, I think, oh, well, if I was atheist, at least I wouldn't have to struggle with the question of why a good God is making me suffer, right? And
Right.
so you get into all these intellectual and philosophical questions and wrestling. And yet, for me, God has really sustained me. I feel like I would be in complete despair if I, did not have my Christian faith to cling to. So that's really been my bedrock the last 8 years, as well as my passion for singing and music and comedy. Luckily my natural disposition is, I mean, who doesn't love joy? But I love comedy. I love laughing. I love, sarcasm, and these things have really been gifts from God to me in this fire, because otherwise I don't think I think I would have taken myself too seriously, or,
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. And they talk about laughter being the best medicine, and I
Yeah.
really believe that that's true, that if we can
Yeah.
find a humorous side to ourselves, and like you say, not take ourselves too seriously or anything really, um
Exactly.
it makes such a huge difference. And I think your perspective is everything, in
Yeah.
life. Yeah. Yeah. And you talk about the whole why thing. I mean,
Yeah.
that question is huge. That was the question that I was asking when I lost my husband. And it really was a turning point for me when I was just struggling with that whole question of why, like, why me? Why now? Why did this
Yeah.
have to happen? Where is he gone? I mean, there's so many big questions. And
Right.
that soul searching, I found was really key for me to find my own faith, to find my own way through it. Is that what
Yeah.
you found?
Absolutely. I mean, I think going through those questions, you come to a greater realization of who you are. You kind of find yourself and, obviously what your beliefs are, whether you're a Christian or not, I mean, it's for me, it was like my faith was kind of turned upside down because I wouldn't say I was raised with the prosperity gospel, which, in my belief is false. I believe that the Bible, I mean, now I know that the Bible, explicitly promises Christian suffering. Jesus said, in this life you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world. And so when I started suffering, I was like, whoa, 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 God, I thought you were a good God. You protect us. There's all these verses about protection. And it's like, well, what does that mean? That doesn't mean you're not going to go through life's challenges. And so my theology was turned upside down. But through that process, kind of like C.S. Lewis, who was one of the most famous modern Christian thinkers of all time, I kind of came to a deeper and more solid theological understanding of Christianity and my faith and what on earth Jesus Christ even stood for. I mean, the emblem of our religious faith is essentially a cross. I mean, it's a symbol of
Yes.
torture people, so
Yes.
I don't know how Christians, including me, can walk around thinking, oh, la di da, the Lord is going to save us from this and that. I mean, yes, in my view, the Lord does save you because ultimately all Christians go to heaven, but that doesn't mean he's going to protect you from, the day-to-day trials of this difficult life. So,
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. And I love that you're bringing up that perspective because, in my world that I've experienced, it really took me from a place of thinking that God punishes, and I think there is that feeling that we did something wrong and why do we deserve this? Why did God do this to us? You hear people saying that, and I really don't believe that. Um,
no, I
yeah,
agree with, yeah. I mean, can I answer that really? Because
sure.
I think there are two things that the Lord, I mean, we Christians, it's like you'll hear the parlance, the Lord, or whatever. I know it sounds weird if you're not a Christian, but the Lord kind of gave me these two insights because I was really struggling with that too. Like, come on, Lord, like, why can't I just get married and stay married? And all these, hashtag blessed that you give other Christians, you see it on Instagram, they get married, they pop the babies, whatever. I was feeling a lot of bitterness of, why is this my path? Come on. I thought there was a
Mm.
Christian context or a Christian contract, Lord, where, there's this joke I told my late husband. He was a very strong believer and he had cancer as a kid and the Lord had healed him of his cancer. And then he got cancer again, right when we were starting to date. Which was the ironic timing. But I told him once, I said, doesn't God owe every Christian and even every person what I like to call the bag of basic blessings? Like, come on, like, all right, give a little suffering here and there to keep us humble, on this earth, but like otherwise give us health, couple kids, good childhood, a stable job, and don't we deserve that as humans? And my husband was like, no, like, have you even read the scriptures? Like, Jesus Christ came to die, like, and we are his followers. Do you really think you're going to be immune from suffering yourself? But to answer your question, I was also struggling with like, oh my gosh, am I being punished? Because I was a very prideful person. I still am. I mean, we all have our, we have our, flaws in terms of, I'm a go-getter. I like to achieve things. And I think I put my identity in large part in a lot of these earthly accomplishments, if you will.
Yes.
And so I was wondering, like, am I being punished for my sin? Why am I literally on a bedpan with my mother nursing me? I mean, your audience doesn't know my story. Maybe I can get into it. But
Hmm.
basically, the Lord brought my eyes to this verse in John where the Pharisees, the Jews, explicitly ask, I believe it was the Pharisees, but a group of people asked Jesus, why is this man blind? Because there's this guy who's blind in front of Jesus. And Jesus said, and they say, is it because he sinned or did his parents sin? In other words, is he being punished? And Jesus's response is so beautiful because he actually says, no, this did not happen because of any sin, but because I wanted to reveal my glory, God's glory in all this. In other words, God can heal the blind, the lame, the sick. And it really turns your perspective around because you're like, okay, phew, it's not because I'm being punished. That's not correct theologically for Christians. But then B, it raises a whole other host of questions like, whoa, you're telling me that I'm suffering for God's glory then? Like you're saying you
Hmm.
allowed this man to be born blind for God's glory? That's a whole other theological can of worms, which I address in my book. But that was a long answer to tell you it was so relieving when I finally lifted that burden and said, it's not that I'm being punished. The universe, whatever you believe, for me, it's Jesus Christ. You know, I believe he's real 100% and he is not punishing me. And it's just such a great burden lifted off.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And there was something about it for me, connecting it to, I think somebody said, it's like Earth School. You're here to learn. And
Oh,
I was like, as a teacher and a principal, it really hit me, right? Like it was like, oh, so this is kind of like an opportunity to learn something, to grow through it. And that
yeah.
changed a lot for me because I felt like, okay, so this is a challenge then. It's a challenge. It's something that I can work through, and there's got to be an answer. There's got to be a way that I can find joy again, that I can find happiness again. And that's what kept me going, is yearning and searching for that answer. And I think everybody's answer is probably a little bit different. I think the searching is part of the process. It's part of the healing. So we can't just get the answer. Yeah. So um, tell us a little bit more about your background. Like you were saying, you have this chronic illness. Tell us a little bit more about that.
So it's been 8 years. Basically, I had just gotten my dream job as a federal prosecutor. I had just turned 30. I was at the height of my game, totally healthy as a horse the first 30 years of my life. I get this job. I'm in downtown San Francisco, ready to prosecute criminals in my legal suit. And 2 weeks in, I fell mysteriously ill with this rare neurological illness. And the doctors threw a million diagnoses at me. And my whole church was praying. We were like, what is this? It was very severe. And just to explain for your audience, my illness stems from the connection between my ear and my brain, such that I cannot tell where I am in space. So right now, you can't tell, but the entire world is spinning around me, and it's extremely uncomfortable. It's painful. It's just, and I'm going to slam back down on that bed, after this podcast because this is too much stimulation for me. Because there's an organ in all of our ears called the vestibular system, which I hadn't even heard of, but again, that manages where your brain processes where you are in space. So, long story short, it's been 8 years. It's chronic, it's nonstop, day in, day out. The world is turning around me. I've been hospitalized twice, Stanford, UCSF, you name it. I mean, I've tried 150 treatments. I mean, you cannot imagine. And for the first 4 years, I was strictly bedridden on that bed, literally on a bedpan with my mother nursing me. Okay. We're talking completely disabled where I could not move my head even an inch without the world. I mean, the world is still turning, but these days I can sit up without my blood pressure dropping, and the doctors have no idea why. So my family has gone through that gamut of maneuvering the medical system and frankly, and I don't want to be mean to doctors or something, but just being so frustrated with the system because, we just couldn't get answers. And I'm not blaming doctors because they just frankly didn't know what's wrong with me. I mean, we tried so many treatments for different things, and yet no answers. And, as a Christian, it is it almost like makes, I mean, I don't want to speak for others, but I felt like it's almost made it, no, not worse. I don't want to say that, but it's like when you're expecting God to give you, deliverance and answers, it's very difficult as a Christian to come to terms with, Lord, why are you allowing this suffering? And, something God gave me when I felt like he was calling me to acceptance of this, rather than continuing to fight this disease, which to others, who might not be in the Christian faith will view that as giving up. But I'm just telling you that I felt like I had a supernatural experience with God where he told me, I'm calling you to acceptance of this. Which in the grief space, I think you can understand with your framework. But, because there's this story, it's a real story, in my belief, in the Bible, where the Lord tells the Apostle Paul, who, by the way, suffered with his own chronic affliction. Theologians don't know if it was a severe eye disease or some other thorn, but the Apostle Paul writes in Corinthians, he says, I begged the Lord to heal me, but the Lord answered no. And the Lord told me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. And, the world looks at that and says, okay, you're telling me God wants us to be weak. That's why he allows chronic illnesses so his strength can shine. I mean, it really turns your theology upside down.
Yes.
I'm kind of giving you the Christian backdrop for
Mhm.
those people who. So, anyway, coming to acceptance has meant surrendering every day to God and saying, may your will be done, kind of like Jesus said, not my will, but yours be done. And it's been a tough journey, but somehow God sustains me. Every day I wake up, I sit up, I start spinning more, and yet God gives me joy, like in the most random of places, whether it was bringing me my husband, and I got married amidst this stupid illness. I
Yeah.
mean, it's been just a series of surprises that God has really blown my socks off in terms of, okay, yeah, I'm letting you suffer, and I know you're suffering. I mean, Jesus understands suffering. He draws near to us in suffering. Psalm 34 says he draws near to the brokenhearted. And yet, even in the fire, he's given me the most miraculous resurrections. I got married to a man with cancer, and it was a beautiful 1 year of marriage. The guy died a year later, and yet I would never take it back for a million, in a million years. And so God just kind of surprises you in these ways, even in the lion's den.
Yeah, and it's so amazing. I mean, there's a couple of approaches to that, right? You can go into that and just be miserable and just, the life is terrible and you can wake up every morning in that way. And I think that that gets comfortable over time too. Or you can change your perspective. And, obviously your faith is really strong. And that's what's helped you get through. It's like that connection with a higher self. And you say, that's Jesus Christ for you. And our spiritual community would talk about, the universe or our higher selves. And I think it's all the same thing. It's like, you reach out and you find that and you realize that even through suffering there can be joy and that it doesn't have to be suffering. I think it's Eckhart Tolle that talks about, pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. And yeah, yeah,
Because I think there's a quote, maybe it's the one you're talking about. I'm not sure about the philosopher you just mentioned, but the one where it says, yeah, it's like suffering is our response,
yes,
right? It's like yeah, the pain will happen, but you don't have to suffer if your response doesn't view it as pain. Even though, like, I'm sure an audience member out there is saying, "Don't tell me I don't have pain. I have grief over this and that." And but it's really our response reframes it, and for me personally, psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, has just made all the difference. And I also want to touch on one thing you said earlier, which I really liked, because I never really got this when I was, a baby Christian, if you will. It's like this idea that our challenges are actually tests of character, and like that this earth really is a training ground. That is a fundamental Christian idea. So I agree with you. Like, this idea that we're just being molded in this fallen world that's filled with cancer and disease and all sorts of, brutality and disease and everything, but God somehow redeems that evil in my worldview by using these challenges to grow our faith in him and our trust and our character. Like the New Testament over and over says that this life is a race and it's a challenge for Christians to stay true to God even amidst the sufferings that he is allowing, because suffering produces character, hope, and hope does not disappoint us because we know we're heading towards eternity with God without suffering. So this idea of a challenge really helped me say, heck no, I'm in, like, I'm a gladiator over here. Like, I don't have to be in a pity party, while everyone else is, still at the law firms and I'm slapped on a bed. I can say, no, I'm doing a different kind of work. I'm doing an internal work, which I frankly would never have had the opportunity at a law firm, because you're just slaving away for, I mean, I loved the law firm. I don't want, but it's more just, you're not thinking about sort of the higher virtues of, am I courageous? Am I trusting God? Am I having joy even amidst the hardest circumstances? I mean, who do we get inspired by? We get inspired by the paraplegics, the people who are in the Olympics in their wheelchairs. And you're thinking, these people have character, man. And I'm over here wallowing that, I can't eat a hamburger today because I feel nauseous. I mean, really, it's like, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that when we change our perspective that way and we start to take a step on our own in that direction, or we start to look for that hope or the answer that I was talking about, which is a constant search, I just think that when you take one step in that direction, the universe takes like 10 for you. And so when you're talking about Christianity, I think that it's like you get that mindset, you get that positive mindset, and then everything, like you say, you surrender. You wake up in the morning and you go, okay, I don't know what's going to happen today. I'm not sure what's going to, but I'm just trusting that you've got my back and that we're going to get through this, and that, there is going to be joy in this. And I've never been disappointed when I've done it that way. Yeah.
That's really inspiring, because I will tell you, like, and because I want to be honest, I mean, even as a Christian, sometimes I have felt disappointed. I have had many nights where I've been on that bed praying to God, personally, in a personal relationship with him, saying, Lord, I'm so disappointed. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
why is my brain spinning? Why am I in this severe pain? Why did I lose my husband? I mean, I have felt all those emotions, and I'm sure you have too, but I get
Oh,
what you're
yes,
saying. You're saying,
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah,
Hmm.
you're saying eventually, as you're
Yes.
growing through those emotions, it comes to a place where you look back and you say, whoa, I've grown as a person because of this adversity. I mean, like, all those stupid trite phrases like purpose in the pain and all that, like, I'm for better or worse, and for better, they are true. It's just
Mhm.
like they really turn out to be true. And the way that the world works, the way God set it up, is like we are growing through these challenges. Otherwise, he wouldn't allow them. But sometimes when you're in the middle of it, and I still am, your emotions get the better of you and you say, why does it have to be this hard,
Yeah.
And yet there's always God's grace every morning. The Bible says his mercies are new every morning. So no matter how hard this day was, tomorrow there's a new fresh set of grace that he will, give you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and you're right. It's not like I don't have disappointments, and that I don't sometimes just want to scream at everybody who's running this show. But it's like I know deep down that I'm going to be okay. I've got that sense that it's going to be okay. No matter what, it's going to be okay.
Where do you
And
think
when
that
you have,
comes from?
what's that?
Where do you think that comes from? Like, how can, like, because I'm guessing someone in your audience today is like, well, how do you know I'll be okay? It's like, lucky for you. And I'm playing devil's advocate. I'm curious if you can maybe tell your listeners and even me, like, where does that come from, that sense that you'll be okay?
I think, when my husband passed away, there was a lot about where is he? Where did he go?
Right,
Where do we go?
right.
And I think my understanding now it's so strong that he's right here with me. I can feel that essence. And so, and I know that he's fine. He's actually more than fine. He's doing really well. And so it's like I know that even after I leave this world, um, I'm gonna be fine. It's all gonna be okay. So it's I think there's a lot in that, in trusting where we're going, and that this really is just a small piece of our total existence, and that we're, like you say, learning and growing through all of it.
There's the way Christians put it is that this life is just a dot, but eternity in heaven with Christ is like the line. So
Yeah.
so we agree with the framework in terms of like this earth, this temporary earth with all this crap and cancer and all that. I mean, it's just a sliver of the experience, of the human for all eternity. Like we were created with souls and we long for longevity. We long for that eternal, destination, whatever it is. So I totally agree with you that when you flip your mindset that no, this is not the end, death is not the end, that really changes the whole game for those of us who are chronically suffering or have big losses like your husband, my husband. It makes you think, okay, if this is not the end, then I do not need to despair because this is not the end of the story.
Mhm.
I mean, Paul, the apostle Paul says in Thessalonians, we do not grieve, like, the others in the sense that, in the Christian faith, we have a hope, in Christ in heaven. And so if you're grieving with hope and the hope of reunion, it just changes the whole game, kind of like what you're
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah. Yeah. And I really think that, I'm still here. And so there must be a
Yeah.
reason.
Yeah. You have
And
a purpose.
yeah. And so, and I don't even really need to have, and I'm starting to just come to this realization now, because I was very much into, if I'm not doing something, if I'm not producing something, if I'm not achieving
Oh,
something, then
yeah.
who am I? Right? Like, what am I? And now I'm starting to realize, just over this last few months, it's starting to really hit home that I don't have to be anybody but me to
Yeah.
be important, to have a purpose, right? And it's taken a long time for that to kind of come through, and there's been a lot of painful moments in just sitting with that and thinking, okay, well, right now I'm done my book, and I'm,
Yeah.
yeah, I still, I don't have anything new on the horizon, but yet I have so many blessings in my life. I have so much that I look forward to when I get up in the morning, and it's like I don't need to achieve something to be somebody. And
Right. Oh my gosh.
you can say that, but it's hard to, I've heard that before, but I don't think I've ever believed it like I do now.
Oh my gosh, I cannot agree with you more. Like, again, like I said earlier, for me, I mean, I have always been someone who just kind of like you, it's like driven, whatever, type A, got to get the straight A's, whatever, like proving my worth through what I do, whether it's, law school or got to get into the top law firm or whatever dumb gold star I was chasing the first 30 years of my life. And when I fell ill, it was like, again, like my theology got turned upside down because obviously I channel everything through my Christian worldview. And for me, it was like, where does my identity come from? And it was like, am I putting my identity in my accomplishments in my career when I don't have a career now? So who on earth am I? And obviously, as a Christian, I believe that my identity comes from Christ, the fact that he loves me unconditionally, immeasurably, no, even whether I'm on a bedpan or I'm arguing before the Supreme Court, I have immeasurable worth because I have been made in the image of Christ. And there's a God up there who loves me even through my most severe of testings and who died for me, to save me from my sin. This is the Christian worldview.
Mhm.
And it really does change. I don't think I believed that until I fell ill because when you're clinging to your we call it idols in the Christian parlance in
Yeah.
terms of, oh, my worth comes from my, career or husband or whatever. When you're not in the fire, you're not forced to realize, actually, no, no, you are not what you produce. You are just loved because you are the beloved. I mean, God created all of us, and it's this beautiful realization that lets you relax once you're finally like, oh, great. Like I can do one podcast, 10 podcasts, or zero podcasts, and I'm still loved the same. So
Yes.
anyway, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And yeah, that whole identity piece. And I guess we often use the word ego, that all is the same. And and for a while, I really struggled with that. I mean, for a long time, because I think we grow up thinking we need to achieve, right? And it's hard.
Raised that way. I mean,
Yeah.
society raises us that way. The minute you're a toddler, what are you going to be when you grow up, honey? Rather than asking, are you going to be a kind person, honey? I mean, it's
Yeah.
like, I mean, I'm sure I'm being facetious, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And just, and then that goes back to my whole career in education and thinking about, how we raise kids, how we put them through this school system. And even looking at my grandkids now, I think about, we want them to, there's certain rules, right? You can't be mean to other people and all that kind of
Yeah,
stuff. But I'm starting to think the approach is more like, how good does this feel when I do something kind for someone else? Like, it's
that's
just,
good.
yeah. And it's just
It's a
like,
better,
show
yeah.
them that. Yeah. Yeah.
Although, in my view, like at least I'm so sinful, or like I feel like our natural state, is like not that we feel good when we're mean to others, but like sometimes it doesn't feel good to be nice to others because you have to share your toys.
Right.
And, kids, they have a sense of justice and fairness. And if they don't think it's fair to share their toys, I don't know. So it can get kind of tricky.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, you're the one in education, so I trust you on.
Well, and I mean, this is older kids. I'm thinking about um the little ones. I think it's
Different
tougher.
approach.
Yeah, they're in a different space. Um, so somebody who's listening right now and just feels like, you know, sure, you're talking about all of this and you too seem to have it figured out or whatever.
Like emotionally, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. What advice do you have for them? Like what would you say to them? Like I mean, we are here on the podcast. You have your music, and I've written a book and you've done your things, accomplishments and such. What would you say to somebody who feels like they have nothing?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I mean, first of all, I want to say my heart goes out to you if you're the person that this applies to, because I can tell you that, when I was 30, I was, bright-eyed, bushy tail, like I was just so, I looked at the world in a very different way, and then the world came crashing down. And when I lost first the health, then my career, then the husband last year. So I feel you in terms of I don't feel like I have anything. I've lost everything. Every time I get a blessing, it gets ripped away. I mean, I understand all of those emotions, and I pray for you, because because when you understand, you can empathize more. And in fact, I'm a more compassionate person now, compared to who I was 8 years ago. But I would say, as I've mentioned, and again, I never like to force anything on anyone, but for me, the hope I have found has been clinging to God and just the peace that He has given me. I don't think I wouldn't be a Christian today, 8 years in, after 8 years of spinning, if I didn't feel like the Holy Spirit was walking with me through this illness, like just, like the Bible promises, I will not leave you or forsake you through great suffering. And I found that to be true. And so that's why I'm not an atheist today. I found God has been powerfully with me. And I would say, and I'm not trying to encourage you to come over to my faith or something. I'm saying try to find in your own valley maybe an awareness that, well, again, I don't like to be pushy, but for me, it was finding God with me in the fire, and that has immeasurably helped me. But I've also, on a secular level, I've also found that music and like use your talents. For me, it was music. I get up, I sing a song, I'm spinning, and it's very painful, but then I sing the song. I'm a jazz singer. I love music, and then I slam back down on the bed. But that 5 minutes of joy
Mm,
has given me so much, just like endorphins and just a reframe of no, I still have sprinkles of joy that I can find. And so whatever your talent is or your interests are, don't give them up just because you might have lost your husband like I did, or you might have lost your, I mean, God forbid, lose your child, or whatever you're going through. There are still these sprinkles of joy, I like to call them, everywhere you look. You just have to find them. You have to, and it's so hard to do when you're depressed. Like, I get it,
Mhm.
I'm not over here saying, oh, life is a bunch of puppies and butterflies. It's like, it's more that as much as suffering there is in this world, there is so much beauty that God has given us, whether it's a rainbow or the rain that's so refreshing when you're inside with hot cocoa. Try to find those small gifts. And I think that's what you probably do too, Angela.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And at first, I felt like every time I was seeking out joy, it was, I felt like it was always clouded with some kind of sorrow. It was like, am I ever going to feel pure joy again? Like, it was like,
Oh,
I'd be happy. And then I would just feel like, no, this isn't really true happiness because I just I don't feel it.
you're in the back, the sorrow. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And then there was a moment where I realized that I could actually do both and that I didn't have to do them at the same time. And for some reason, it just, I separated the two. There's joy and there's sorrow. And I could put sorrow away and experience joy and go back to sorrow. And I wouldn't have to experience them, have one overcloud the other, if that makes sense. It was the weirdest moment. And it came out of, well, actually, it came out of, there's this analogy. I think her last name is Tonkin, but she talks about how there's a black ball inside the jar and that's grief, that represents grief. And then the jar gets bigger, but the grief ball stays the same. And I had a real aversion to that whole thing because I felt like if I'm going to be carrying this black ball with me all the time, then I can never truly be happy because I'm always going to have this black ball hanging out. And then one day I was sitting and I was thinking, well, why don't you just take the black ball and put it over there? Like,
Yeah.
and as soon as I realized that, it was just like, poof. So I can have joy. I can have absolute joy and still go back to grieving from time to time, but they are separate. They're not the same. Love and grief are not the same. And yeah, it's just getting clearer and clearer as time goes on for me in my own belief system about how this works.
Well, is a really fascinating reframe. I kind of love that. I mean, I will tell you, like, I have gone through the same journey of trying to reconcile that. And actually, one of the main themes in my memoir here, which by the way, this is a Christian memoir. And so I encourage, I mean, this is not I did not write this for the sales. Like, it's basically a Christian testimony, but I want to tell your audience, like, if you are curious about how Christians view suffering, like, how on earth do they remain Christian when they feel like God is literally like torturing them because we believe God is in control and yet allowing me to go through all this? Read my book because it will be an interesting theological take on. I explore all the reasons I believe God allows suffering that are set forth in the Bible, and many will surprise you. But my point was, one of my main themes was having joy in suffering. And like, this is this idea, so you're saying separate the two, but in the Christian faith, there's this bedrock idea in the New Testament, which the Apostle Paul mentions over and over again, which is count it all joy when you're suffering. I mean, hear how extreme that is. Count it joy. Are you serious? You're telling me to count it joy when my spouse gets diagnosed with cancer? Or,
Right.
and the Apostle Paul and his colleague Silas, they're worshiping when they're shackled in a Roman prison. They're being persecuted for their faith, and yet they are worshiping. So they're singing through the fire, if you will. That's the title of my
Yeah.
book. But this idea of having joy right in the pit, like right while you're suffering, like, Christianity is kind of bipolar in that it calls us to have both at the same time. And the reason we can have joy is this life is temporary. We are moving towards an eternal world with no suffering with the Lord. But I really struggled with that concept. And I kept saying, Lord, like it's hard to have joy in the pit. Like I want to separate the two, kind of like Angela
Yeah.
said. And there came a point where I felt like God was saying, well, as a Christian, you are not supposed to stay in the grief anyway. Like, yes, we do mourn. Jesus wept over his friend Lazarus. God hates death. I mean, the point is, you do grieve. God allows grief and wants you to grieve. It's a normal human emotion, but you're supposed to move out of that eventually. He doesn't want you to stay in the pit. We have hope. And so eventually the grief gets smaller and smaller. Yes, it will stay with you forever, unfortunately, because you've lost a loved one. But at the end of the day, the joy gets that box you said, or the
The
jar. I
jar.
do
Yeah.
agree with that person because the jar of joy gets bigger and bigger. And whether the grief is outside the box or in the box, the joy and the hope is what's supposed to take over, for Christians. So my framework is very similar. The Christian foundation is very similar to what you're saying.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. There's tons of similarities. And as I go through grief, and I don't know, I've just started to think of it more as a process of healing. And I started to realize that, life really is grief because it's always changing. And every time something changes, you're going through grief. It might be a different magnitude for sure. There's some small moments, and then there's some bigger moments of grief in life. And I always think that whole idea of grieving is really a process of working through change and working through loss. And so, yes, in that respect, I believe we do grieve for a lifetime because we're always experiencing something changing. And I also think that, like you say, joy can be pure in that. It doesn't have to be always clouded. And I think that's where a lot of people get stuck, believing that they have to feel that sorrow in amongst or clouding that joy. And I just remember vividly, and trying to enjoy my new grandchild. That was what it was. My husband was gone, and I felt like I didn't have a grandpa, and I couldn't be a grandma with a grandpa. And then yet I had this little bundle of joy, and it was like it was clouded over with this sorrow, and I couldn't feel the pure joy of just having this grandchild. And that's when I had to really just let that go somehow. It was like, I need to feel this joy, and I need to let go of whatever's causing this suffering that's happening at the same time. And it took a while. It took quite a while, actually, for me to move through that. But when
Yeah.
I did, I found out I can feel joy again. I can feel pure happiness again. And that's what's kept me going.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. It's just this realization that no, we can have joy even with all the suffering. It might even be all around you still. And yet,
Mm.
we as humans, I think, are wired to be very resilient. I do think God created us that way because He knew we were going to live in this fallen world temporarily. And so He has given us these spirits that, you can slap me on a bed or you can take away Angela's husband or my husband, and yet we will find hope because again, there's just so much more past this, temporary life that for me, you can tell I always kind of take it to eternity because when you've lost so much and there, and again, I'm not saying let's escape this life, this life
Mhm.
is dumb, whatever. The point is find joy now. But when you have hope beyond this, it really changes your whole, it's kind of like, all right, I missed the Italian vacation, but I've got the Greek vacation coming up. Like, I
Yeah.
know that you get, it's a weird analogy, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So tell us more about, where people can find your book and, all the other stuff that just recently put out? Like, where can people find these things?
Sure, absolutely. So yeah, when my husband and I were married, we started a YouTube channel called The Silverman Show. And for those who aren't Christian but curious about the Christian theology and how Christians face suffering, I'm telling you, my husband was a warrior. Like he had gone through cancer twice, and he walked through that second cancer like, I don't care if I die, like I'm just going to meet Christ the minute I die. So we had so much joy, even amidst
Mm.
my chronic illness, his cancer. And so we start this YouTube channel where we put up his Christian sermons on how on earth do Christians walk through suffering without losing your mind. And then also all of my music, I play violin, I sing jazz, I sing oldies, pop. I mean, I wrote a whole album from my bed, just on in my mind, and then I would sit up at the piano. Like we basically we put up all of our musical endeavors on the channel. You can find some joy there, or you can buy my book. It's called Singing Through Fire, and my hope is that this will show you how Christians handle grief. It's kind of fascinating. And like I said earlier, I'm a comedian, so I tried to make this very funny. I mean, think about how the topic is so heavy that I had to make it funny. Like, think about how my husband and I literally fell in love. I didn't even mention this story, but God
Right.
brought him to me while I was on a bed. And Matt had just been diagnosed with cancer, and yet he comes into my house. He had called my mom and said, "Your daughter is suffering. The whole church is praying for her. I know I'm going through cancer, but can I encourage your daughter spiritually?" He comes in, we fall in love after about 8 visits of him sitting next to me. I'm on that bed. And it was like the wildest love story ever. So this is also a kind of a hilarious romance. It's like a romantic love story of how on earth do you fall in love amidst severe suffering? Matt might die. Should I even marry this kid? Just all the hilarious questions, unfortunately, that you go through. But the point is, oh, you can find the book on Amazon. It's called Singing Through Fire by Lara Silverman. It's available internationally. And I'm also doing comedy on Instagram these days at my maiden name, which is at Lara Palangian. So anyway, and I'm on Facebook as well at Lara Silverman. So you can find me. I'm trying these days to just every morning I get up. I've written this book, praise to God, it's a #1 bestseller now, and I'm just letting that go on pilot, and I can rest more these days and
Mm.
you know, just do music and comedy.
Beautiful. Love that. And we'll put all those links underneath the video so that people can easily access that because I think they're going to want to. This has been absolutely a delight. Do you have any last minute or last advice or words of wisdom that you want to share with the community?
I would say, whether you're a Christian or not, or whatever your worldview is, all those trite phrases where, there's pain in the purpose and hope is coming in the morning and all this. I kind of rolled my eyes when I was 3 years into this illness because I was just at a point where I was just so demoralized. And I will tell you, if you are someone out there right now, again, saying, well, easy for you guys, you're all optimistic. Maybe God wired you that way. Like, you don't know what I'm dealing with. I would say, trust me and Angela on this one, because even though we are happy right now, we have also gone through that deep valley, and we still are in many ways. We're both still grieving, and I can't remember when your husband passed, but my husband passed away a year ago, and it still feels like I'm grieving, and yet I'm telling you genuinely as your friend, like there is always hope. There really is. Like God is so good, and he will bring things into your life that, he's the God of resurrections. Jesus Christ resurrected to give us eternal life, and he gives, all of us this grace out of nowhere, even in the deepest valleys. But you have to seek it. And so just stay true to yourself. If you're a person who's naturally joyful, don't let yourself succumb to the pit of misery, because I was so close to that, and in many parts of my journey I did feel bitter, and I regret that. So I'm just telling you as a friend, have hope, because there's always joy coming.
Beautiful. I love that. Thank you so much again for taking the time and sharing your story and all of your wisdom. And I really encourage people to check out all of your resources and follow you. I think that's going to be a great comfort for a lot of people. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Angela.
Bye for now.